Hey, welcome back to the Opt-in podcast for another fun week we have in store. This is one of the topics that we are going to have here on a recurring basis. As I mentioned last quarter, every quarter we will do a quarter in review episode where I will roll through the goals that I had set for myself, and we will talk about what they were. We'll talk about how it went. We'll talk about what I learned, and then spend a little bit of time talking about how I'm going to plan the goals for the next quarter. So this is important because in most avenues of life, I would even wager to say all of them, there is a big push to set goals at the beginning of the year. There are New Year's resolutions, there's annual planning processes inside of businesses. The beginning of the year is when everybody doubles down and says, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to nail. This is how the year is going to go. And I think it's pretty foolish, to be honest. I really, really do. In my goal setting episode that you can find from January of this year, you'll hear me talk about how I actually do goal setting in November. So teaser, in about 5 months from now, we're going to be having a conversation around goal setting well before January. And that's because by the time November hits, you know exactly what at least your first quarter is going to look like coming out of the end of the year. And it's a good time for you to just really kind of level set and have some perspective. That's not what today's episode is about, so I'm not going to get too far into that. Because of that perspective, I have learned that you can set a goal for the year and really you can action goals a quarter at a time in 12-week chunks. If you try to action goals for any period longer than that, you're going to tend to lose sight of where you want to go. You're going to tend to have things come into your periphery that are going to adjust the priority. You're going to tend to be somewhere other than where you intended to end up because you would set the goal without all of the information and without the days playing out in front of you. So set the goals in January or November or whenever you choose to do it, and then immediately break them up into what can I do in the next 12 weeks? And then when you get that 12 weeks done, do a review. And then what can I get done in the next 12 weeks? So I'm going to walk you through the process today using myself as the example so that you can get familiar with this process. You can start to reflect on if it would be a good fit for your processes and routines that you have. And this is also going to shed some light for you around what it's like for somebody who is a C-suite executive inside of a startup, for somebody who is launching her own business on the sides, hello, nights and weekends, and who also has a house full of growing boys and is trying to make sure that she cares for herself and is showing up in all of the ways that are important to her. I want you to be able to see and hear what that looks like on a quarterly basis because it's important to understand how other people are doing it. So when we think back to the goals that I set at the end of the second quarter, rolling into third quarter, they came across 3 dimensions. And this is always, for me, how this is going to shake out. For some people, it will shake out across 2, and I'll say what those are. But for me, the 3 dimensions are my career, my 9 to 5. What are my goals inside of that? And then the second set of goals that I have, or the second category that I have, is my business ventures. So what goals do I have around my personal business ventures that are completely unrelated to my 9 to 5? And then my third category is personal. And this is where health and well-being, mental health, and, things like I want to run a marathon or whatever fall into that category. For some of you, you're only going to have 2. You're going to have your career and you're going to have your personal. And then for some of you, you're going to have the 3 that I mentioned. Regardless of how many you have or what they have, within each of those, I recommend that you define no more than 3 goals apiece. Because we as humans remember things in threes. So if I have 3 dimensions, I always know what those are. If I have 3 goals inside of each dimension, I also know what those are. Any more than that, and you tend to get distracted. Any more than that, you tend to have a task list and not goals. And the purpose of doing this exercise is that you create goals in the dimension for a 12-week period of time. You are time bound. What are you going to achieve in the next 12 weeks? That is it. That is simply it. You're not worried about what you're going to do in the next 6 months. You're not worried about what you're going to do in the next 18 months, just the 12 weeks. And the key is that those 12 weeks and those goals that you set should be moving the needle for whatever you set as an annual goal at the beginning of the year. So for example, in the startup, we're pre-revenue. And one of the goals at the beginning of the year was a financial target for how much revenue we were going to generate by the end of the year. So one of the goals this quarter was by the end of the quarter to be actively pursuing revenue, to be completing daily revenue generating activities. And there was a lot of work that had to lead up to that to get us to the point where we could actually go out and try to get some business. So one of the goals within the 12 weeks for the 9 to 5 was to end the quarter completing revenue generating activities. Now, there were other goals within that because we had made some substantial changes in how we were approaching the business in the first quarter. And so the second quarter was a little bit about starting anew, taking the pivot that we had made in the first and getting it into motion. It had a variety of factors and flavors, and it spanned every single function that you could think about in a business setting. And so there were 2 other goals specifically around that. One with the technology platform being ready and one related to marketing and branding. We had 3 goals in total. And they were all tied directly to that big annual goal of reaching a revenue target by the end of the year. It's very simple, and they were all achievable within that 12-week period. And then when you pivot over to my business ventures, it was very much the same situation. I had a goal at the beginning of the year to have whatever I touched from a business venture perspective, all of the things that kind of sat within that, all of my offerings, to be generating revenue by year end. That was the goal, to be able to make some money, to not just have expenses, but to see some sort of success as it translates to transactional basis. That was the annual goal. So for this 12 weeks, I had a lot of work to do because my goal, one of the goals by the end of the quarter, was to launch a membership offer. I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know what it was going to include, but that was one of the goals. A second goal was that I was going to professionalize the brand, the external facing part of what I was doing here. I was going to take all of these bits and pieces, the podcast and my social media and a YouTube channel I had started and stopped and started, and newsletters and all sorts of things. And we were going to wrap it with a brand identity. And then the third thing is getting really, really clear on the strategy going forward. How are we using all of the pillars? What help do I need to get that done? What does it actually look like once we launch in June so that this thing can be consistently managed over time? So from a business ventures perspective, this quarter was all about basically going the last mile to get us out into the world. And there was a lot of tasks associated with that, but the big picture was launch the membership. And how do we stack all of these other things together that we need to do to launch the membership? And then the third dimension that always is there is personal. And for the second quarter, the month of May, God help me, is in the second quarter. And if you have children, you know that last month of school, whether it's May or June, is the busiest 30 days you have all year. Forget the holidays, forget anything else. That month alone, it tests you to the ends of the earth. And so understanding that, because my children are now 14 and almost 12 and 10, I knew that the number one priority for the 12 weeks was to stay healthy. Number one priority. So then I set goals around how much sleep I was going to get, what my bedtime and wake up time was going to be, that I was going to move my body, that I was going to eat well, that I was going to sleep well, that I was going to drink a gallon of water a day. I set a bunch of goals around how to care for myself, that I was going to rest. I was going to take one day off a week. I was going to make sure that I was really resting and recharging, and that I was shutting everything down so that I could show up and be the best that I could be 6 days out of the week. And also that I was present where it was important for me to be present, be it kids' sporting events, be it promotion ceremonies, be it open house, be it, fill in the blank around it, that I was able to be present where I was needed when I was needed to be present. So that's a big quarter. When you look at, it was only 9 goals, it was only 3 dimensions, but holy smokes, was it lofty. I mean, talk about homegirl biting off more than she can chew. And so I should pause here for a second and say that this is just how I'm wired. This is how I roll. This is who I am. If you're new here, you haven't heard me talk about human design yet. Allison Colon of You Do Woo is my mentor in human design, and I'm something called a manifesting generator, which means I thrive when I have all sorts of things going on. I'm constantly have these ideas and I've got all this stuff going on. But the other thing about my profile is that I'm a little bit of a hermit. So when I'm done giving all of this stuff into the world, I need to go be by myself and replenish the system. So this is normal for me to have these lofty goals and these big lists and to be running all over the place. And I want to say this because this shouldn't be the standard that you set for yourself. I don't want you to look at how much I put on my plate and how much I achieved and say, well, if she can do it, I can do it. I mean, absolutely. Double down on yourself, friend. I'm not going to limit you. If you believe that you can do this much, do it too. But I also want to say that I'm uniquely wired to thrive in this environment. It's not where everybody thrives. So just because you hear me talking about it doesn't mean it's meant for everybody. I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out there because I know that I, in fact, can be overwhelmed sometimes when I hear what people are able to achieve in a short period of time. And it's because they're just wired differently than me. We just approach things in different ways. I know people that literally manifest money out of thin air. And that seems so daunting to me. I don't understand how you get money without hard work. I'm sure that there's something that I'm missing and I'll have an awakening at some point, but we all have our different secret sauce. We all have our different process. We all have our different mechanisms for how we do things. And this is just mine. So I want you to focus around the process I'm walking you through, where I set goals. We went through the quarter and now here we are, we're reviewing what goals did we set? How did we do? What did we learn? What are we going to do for the next quarter? I want you to learn that process through my example. I don't want you to be inspired to go bury yourself in work because that's what Melissa did. Okay, so disclaimer over. So those were the goals. So now the question is, how did it go? That's always the question. And we like to set goals and keep it moving. We do not like to look over our shoulder and say, so how'd that go? What actually happened? What can we learn here? And this is probably the most important piece of this, because if you don't evaluate how it went, if you don't get clear on what you learned, if you don't get clear on what you want to do again and what you don't ever want to do again, you're going to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. And it's going to eventually lead you to diminishing returns. So doing this review about how it went is incredibly important. If we start kind of at the top with the business, the good news is, so the headline is, it's June and we are actively engaged right now as we speak in revenue generating activity. Huge. That was the goal. I wanted to do it a little bit earlier than when we did it, but we did it. The quarter is ending and we're where we want to be. The flip side of that is we didn't get there the way we thought we'd get there. So that's a little bit frustrating. We didn't achieve another goal that we had set. So it made it a little more difficult for us to achieve the big goal. We did it though, because we pivoted and we saw it coming. And I think what's really important is that if you have clarity around the goals that you set for the 12 weeks, when you get off track for one of them and it affects the other ones, you can make very real-time decisions that still help you achieve the other goals. When you're looking at something 12 months in advance, you lose so much time that it's difficult to catch up and pivot and course correct and still get to the end goal that you want, because there just isn't enough time to do it, because things are so opaque until they're disastrous. So with this 12-week window of goal setting, as soon as we saw that we weren't going to meet the first goal that was kind of a dependency for the revenue goal, we said, okay, that's fine. So what do we do instead? Because that goal is really important. So what are we going to do? And we pivoted and we figured it out and we made do and we were able to achieve it. On the flip side, the other goal that we had was related to taking the business direction pivot that we had done in the first quarter and bringing it to life through branding, marketing, operational processes, and a whole bunch of other things. Nailed it. In fact, it was better than I could have imagined. Like, blown away is not even the right way to say it. Like, we have nailed it so well that I'm so just so excited to get this out into the world. Like, I can't wait for us to get to the place where I can begin to share this and I can begin to really live and embody everything that we've built. It's so stinking exciting. So while the first goal wasn't met and we got off track, the other two were, and the really big one, the one that matters the most, we achieved. And hey, also, these three goals all tied back to that first goal that we set at the beginning of the year, that we were going to be generating revenue by year end and we were going to meet a specific goal. So while one of the goals we didn't quite knock out of the park, we're still well on track for that big goal that we set in January. We're well on track for that because we knew what was most important and we were able to pivot within the 12 weeks so that we could protect what was most important. That's why 12-week goals are so important, because you can quickly adjust and react and do so in an impactful way. So 2/3 of those business goals from the 9 to 5 were met. Not awful, not spectacular. It is what it is. From the business venture standpoint, my personal business venture standpoint, this is where I got a lot of pride, to be honest. I mean, humble brag alert, I guess, but we nailed it. We freaking nailed it. There were 3 goals there as well, which I talked a bit about. And one of the reasons that I was so successful in this quarter with this work was because I sought help. I didn't do a single thing alone. I had advisors and I had experts and I had people that I trusted that were already doing activities for me inside of my business help me. And that made a huge, huge difference. The Alexa Donner, who did my branding for this opt-in podcast, was my girl Friday, who I called in when I said, hey, we need to really figure out this brand identity stuff and what our visual representation of that is. And she did an amazing brand overhaul for me. Amazing. And Jordan Bailey, who I met through Guide Culture in January, is helping me with a paid ad strategy on social platforms. But more than that, she advised me on what technology to use for the community that we launched. She connected me to all sorts of different experts and people to talk to and learn from. And she helped me get really clear on who my ideal client was. And then Kate, good old Kate from Amplify, who is my podcast manager, who's my media company, they stepped in and just up-leveled the game across all of the things. They are fully managing my YouTube channel, and Kate and Philip are doing an amazing job with that. They are continuing to produce this podcast at an amazing clip and speed and with so much professionalism. And they're always there if I have a question or need help, but they just are beyond compare. And also, I ended the very first mastermind that I was in that helped me kind of bring all of these ideas to life. And I up-leveled myself and entered a new mastermind. Allie Reeves is my mentor in that mastermind. And her leadership and her guidance and being in the room with people that have launched their own business ventures and are significantly more successful than I am right now has been awe-inspiring. A year ago, I said that I was going to stop doing things that made me feel comfortable. I needed to get uncomfortable because that's where growth comes from. And so I decided to enter a mastermind that I felt like I wasn't ready for because I was too comfortable in the one that I was in. And I've got to say it was the best decision I could have made. I'm learning so much. I'm getting so much advice and encouragement, and I'm inspired by these women that I'm around. So the very first thing that helped me achieve these goals in this business venture space was surrounding myself with people that could help me and not being afraid to ask for their help, not being afraid to inquire, to learn, and to lean on them when I wasn't the right person to be doing the work. So that was the very first thing. The second thing that I'll say is that this was a long time coming. I didn't just wake up one morning and decide to run headlong into a launch and get a community up and running and get all this stuff done. I had decided almost a year ago that this was something I wanted to consider and bring into the world. And then 7 months ago, I really put my foot down on the gas pedal and I built out an entire timeline. This timeline has been known for a very long time. It was just a matter of getting the right people and putting the right pieces to place and then executing against the timeline. So it wasn't as overwhelming as it would have been if I had decided a harebrained scheme on a Saturday to start moving on it. This had been intentional. And then the third thing that helped this be successful and smooth the transition was that a couple of the goals that I had with the 9-to-5 were the same goals that I had with my business ventures. So we were working on marketing and branding in the 9-to-5, and I was working on marketing and branding for my business ventures. And so because I was working on the same genre of work across multiple dimensions, I was able to keep my head in the game. I was able to leverage that muscle more often. By having this, being in the same phase in multiple initiatives, you're able to context switch so much faster. This can be applied to anything. If you're project managing a couple of projects at work, try to get the timelines to line up so that if you're doing requirements in one phase, you're doing requirements in all of the phases. Or if you're defining the scope of the project and you have 2 projects running, do scope at the same time. By having yourself in the same mode of operation across all of the things that you're working on, you're more efficient. You're tuned into exactly what you need to do. You don't need to flit around and pivot. So I would say that one of the keys to the success, specifically in the business ventures, is that the goals that I had there and the work that I was working on there was very similar to what I was doing in the 9-to-5. Now, the topics were incredibly different. The ideal customer is incredibly different. Like the businesses are completely different. But the subject matter, the expertise, the part of my brain that I needed to use, it was the same. So as I was going from day to night and I was looking at things and making decisions and shifting, if I was looking at brand colors for one business, I was looking at brand colors for another. So it was really, really easy for me to be able to pivot and shift and move because I was operating in the same lane across the businesses. So the good news on the business venture side is that we nailed it. The marketing and the branding got done. The YouTube channel got itself up-leveled and soft launched. If you're thinking YouTube channel, I don't know what she's talking about. It's because I haven't launched it in full yet. We're working on it. We'll get there. But the YouTube is up there and out there and ready for the world to consume. And the Intentional Career Collective was born on June 16th. And that is my baby. That's the offer. That's the vision. That's the long game. That's where we get to all join ourselves in community and change the narrative inside of corporations and small businesses and provide all of you the tools that you need to be able to do the work that you want to do the way that you want to do it and live the life that you so want to live. So I was able to achieve all of those business venture goals. And it feels so dang good. It feels so good to have that membership community out into the world and to have it live and to be able to bring that all to you. And it feels so good to have a branding that represents who I am and is professional and continues to tell a story about what we're doing. So from the business venture standpoint, I couldn't be more thrilled with where we are and that we were able to knock it out of the park. And I'm really looking forward to what the next quarter brings. And then on the personal front, I could joke and I could say that the goal there was to not get sick and to survive, which candidly is a little bit true. But the goal was to not get sick. And what that meant was, because I was putting so much attention and focus into the business ventures and the 9-to-5 and all of those things, what I had to do was ensure that what I was going to do to protect my health, mental and physical, was a no-brainer. And so I just enforced rules with myself. You go to bed at 8:30. You get up between 4 and 5, depending on the day of the week and the schedule. You do your journaling, you do your workout, you get ready for the day, you take care of your humans. That was it. That was it. And then I got very specific around what I would and would not be doing from an event perspective. So baseball games, open houses, promotions, etc. We laid it all out there. And then the last thing that I did was I identified one day of the weekend that was just rest. Sometimes it was rest in a camp chair on the side of a baseball field, but there was no work. There was just spending time with friends, watching our kids play sports, or there was time at home, reading a book, screens off, one day every weekend, fully dedicated to rest. And by just having the goal of staying healthy, and being present where I was present, and establishing a very intentional routine to enable that, it took all of the pressure off. I had kicked around, and I joked about it earlier, that maybe I should run a half marathon in June. I ran that one last year. It was super fun. Maybe I should do it again. And I pulled it off the list. I said, you do not have time to manage a training plan, to do all of the work associated with it. You need to just take your foot off the gas. The half marathon will be there. It's not a big deal. I had to make some decisions around things that I just wasn't going to put some effort into, but by staying specific with my routine, I was able to do exactly what I'd hoped. I didn't get sick. I stayed quite well rested, and I attended all of the things. All of them. And there were a lot. So as far as how the second quarter went, it was chaotic and there were pivots and things didn't quite exactly go the way that I wanted to. And there were huge wins and successes all the way around. What I learned in that quarter is that, to the best of your ability, if you can, across all of the dimensions, line up like activities. If you can have goals that are harmonious across the dimensions, do it, because then it helps you reduce context switching. And the other thing that I learned is that in order for you to achieve all of the priorities you set out, you may have to dial back your lofty goal setting. What I mean by that is that I wanted to set some big goals personally around, running and competition and those things, and it just wasn't the right time. It just was not. I needed to get these other things done for these other two lanes, and that was more important than this other goal here. And that's okay. The amount of effort and the perceived level of achievement in a 12-week period does not need to be equal across all three dimensions. Figure out which is the biggest priority, get that aligned, and then figure out what you can do with what's left of your capacity. That's the secret to winning across all of the dimensions, is making sure that it's balanced in a way that's achievable for you. And we talk about that in the goal setting. We talk about how to do that. And whether it's annual goal setting or quarterly goal setting, doing that specifically really helps you maintain the integrity of what you set, and it helps you achieve the goals that you set in a much more efficient, enjoyable way. So we're now at the halfway point of the year. This is a time where you now stop and you pause. And inside of businesses, mostly you do a mid-year review and you say, so how much of that annual goal have I achieved? Do those annual goals even make sense anymore? Do I need to make any adjustments? This is a period of reflection now. So whether you've done these quarterly reviews or you haven't, or this is a new concept for you, What you should be doing right now is pausing and going back and looking at those goals that you set at the beginning of the year and saying, are they sound? Can I achieve them? Are they still a priority? What do I need to do differently for the next 6 months of the year to get there? Do I need to have a conversation with somebody to revise these? You should be doing an audit specifically of what is out there. And so the best way to do that is you pull up the goals and one by one you say, what have I done to move the needle for this? And write it down. And then based on that, say, how far have I come? 25% of the way there, 50% of the way there, 0% of the way there, figure it out. And then once you have an idea of where you stand today, based off of that goal, then the next question becomes, what would it take for me to achieve it by the end of the year? And write it all down. Everything that you need, people you need, money you need, time you need, resources you need, whatever you need to achieve that goal, and do it for every single one. And then after you have that picture, go back and say, can I get it? Is that realistic? If I came forward and said, this is what I need, can I reasonably acquire it and execute against it? And if the answer for any of those is no, then you know that those goals need to be discussed with your manager. You know that you need to pick that up and you need to go to them and say, we haven't even started on this. I want to confirm for you it's a priority. And if it is, how do we shift this other stuff around? Or we got started on this and we are so far off the mark. I'd like to discuss with you my proposal for what we can get done by the end of the year. But you have to do that audit. You have to understand what you committed to, where you're at to meeting that commitment, and where you need to shift and adjust. That's the purpose of a mid-year. And what I will say to you is that when you do the audit and you understand what you've achieved and what's remaining and what you're going to need to get there, and if it's even possible to achieve them, if you need to make revisions or you need to make a request for something, that needs to be prepared so that you can bring it into your manager. You should be coming in with a summary of how you've performed, a summary of what is left, and a recommendation for how the goals should be adjusted, modified, removed, whatever. And if you remove one, should it be replaced with something else? Or did one of the goals become so big that it really takes the place of two? But you need to package all of that together as a proposal. Going into your manager and saying, okay, so this is how I'm performing against all the goals, and I'm just not going to get any of them done this year, will not help you win at work. It will not help you win. I know that this is a little bit of tough love here around this conversation, but that's just not going to be a successful conversation for you in the long run. What you need to do is spend some time reflecting and then come up with a proposal. Now, your manager may tell you absolutely not, the goals are the goals are the goals, and you have to stay the course, or absolutely not, I'm not going to give you any help, you're going to have to figure it out anyway. That's what happens. And then we can have a conversation if you want about what to do when you get that response. The best way to support your mission, the best way to influence the situation is by you understanding very specifically what you have achieved, what's remaining, and what you recommend. When you come forward with all of that information, when you come forward with facts and data and evidence, it's difficult for a manager who's not in the detail and weeds to challenge you. The more confidence you have, the more intention and research and preparation that you have put into your proposal and your summary, the more likely it is that you're going to get buy-in and agreement from them. So as you are looking back over the last 6 months and you're looking forward to the next 6 months, what you want to remember is this is pivotal for you, because in the end, whatever those annual goals are, that's how your performance is going to be measured at the end of the year. So if you end up with a set of goals and you're like, yeah, whatever, they'll get done or they won't get done, and you get to the end of the year and they're not done, and then you get a poor performance review, or you don't get a bonus, or you don't get a raise that you thought you were going to get, part of that blame lays on you because you did not actively step in and advocate for yourself, advocate for what was reasonable, and communicate what needed to change. It's not your manager's job to set goals for you and then make sure that you achieve the goals. It's your job to work with your manager to get those goals set, and then it's your job to communicate how you're doing against them and where you need help. So take the driver's seat on this one. You'll never regret it. You'll get better performance reviews. It will help your career, and it's going to show that you're a leader long before you ever ask for a leadership position. So we've talked about the goals that I set. We've talked about how it went. We've talked a little bit about what you do at the mid-year. And now I want to talk, and we talked about what I learned, right? It was a really interesting quarter to be able to run against all of these dimensions and kind of see where we came out. So what's next? Aside from taking a deep breath, there's still 6 months of the year left. I've done an assessment. The goals that I set at the beginning of the year have not changed. I'm still on track. As crazy as that sounds, we're still going to drive towards those goals. So what's next? Well, what's next is that we look at the next 12 weeks, which happens to be July, August, and September. Now, depending on where you live and what's going on and the industry that you're in, summer can be slow for businesses. A lot of people take vacations, projects slow down, or maybe they even pause. There's a lot of different things that can happen depending upon the industry that you're in. So the very first thing that you want to do is look at the calendar and just say realistically, what are we going to achieve this quarter? Is this a needle moving quarter, or is this a quarter where really after Labor Day is when we get most of our work done? And that's on you. You need to understand your company culture. You need to understand what your environment is like, what you're going to do. I work in a startup, so we don't recognize holidays. I'm kidding. We recognize holidays, but we don't have that company culture that kind of drives productivity in cyclical fashions. So there's not going to be much that looks different in my 9 to 5 between second and third quarter. So we are actively, in fact, even today, we've had discussions around what those goals are going to be. So in the next week or so, we're going to lock in what we're going to achieve by the end of September, and it will be 3 goals again. And it's all going to be very specifically around growing revenue. So we've been doing revenue generating activities, but now we're going to talk about how we actually get that revenue growing. And there'll be a couple of other things as well, including kind of the public launch of the business. But that's pretty locked and loaded, and we know exactly what we need to do. And so what we're spending time on right now is talking about very brass tacks, like how do those 12 weeks play out to make sure that we achieve those goals. From a business venture side, it's really interesting because this is now where we play the hand that we dealt ourselves. So we did all of this work to lead up to the launch on June 16th, and now we know what we're going to be doing in July and August. And then September is got a little bit of a new flavor, but that's already planned. For the business ventures, really what this next 12 weeks looks like is staying consistent. We're doing a lot of testing things out. How does this work? Is this things people want to hear? What does this content look like? How does this platform perform? This is just a period of testing for us because now we've launched and now we're going to learn. So we're going to kind of go into that bubble of try something, see what happens, try something, see what happens. And so we'll come up with some goals inside of the business ventures, but they're not going to be as enormous and game-changing as last quarter was, which is okay. And then from the personal side, staying healthy is still the name of the game. And another part of that is enjoying the time that I have with my kids while they're out of school. So it's, taking some short trips so that we can go do some fun things. It's taking a couple of hours in the afternoon so we can go do some fun things. It's helping my oldest get ready for high school and my middle guy ready for junior high. It's really kind of getting all of us prepared and enjoying the time that we have because it's so limited when there isn't this crazy busy schedule. So it feels a little bit like in this third quarter, at least for the first 2 months, we're pulling our foot off the gas a little bit. And that's okay because we just had a season where our foot was all the way down on the gas. We didn't even consider a break and we just ran and ran and ran. And so third quarter for us is going to be where our foot is still on the gas, but we're allowing the momentum of the car to kind of carry us forward. We pushed so hard and we got farther along our journey than we expected. And so we're going to be able to drive at an appropriate pace for the next few months. And I do have, some races that I'm going to run and some other things I'm going to do that are fun because I didn't do them last quarter because it wasn't a priority. So I'm mixing a little bit of that in too. But really my goals around the third quarter are the 9 to 5 is the priority. Getting that launched and getting revenue in the door and getting all of the things that we want to have happen there done, that's the number one. And then with the business ventures, we want to test and learn. Because for us, the fourth quarter is going to be really, really important. We already have some plans in place there. And so what does that look like and how is that going to shake itself out and how do we ramp up to that? And then personally, we're just going to keep up those routines. Stay healthy, continue to do all of the day in and day out things and enjoy my kids as much as I can. Two of them are, one's a teenager, one's close to a teenager. So, take that with a grain of salt. But that's what we're going to do. So as we wrap this up, I just want to remind all of you that the best thing that you can do today, right now, next week, pull out those annual goals, dust them off, and do that evaluation. What have you done? How far are you to achieving that goal? What do you need in order to get there? And what do you recommend if there's a gap? And then schedule the meeting with your manager. And after you've had that meeting with your manager, look at this quarter, these next 12 weeks. What are you going to do? What are your goals? What are your priorities? How are you going to set those out? And then try it and see if this moves the needle for you, if this is an easier way to be able to bite off the work. Really give it your all and see what comes out of it. I have been doing this quarterly goal setting for 2 years now, and it has changed my approach to everything. I actually have real results and real evidence that I am now delivering more value. I'm delivering more results because I have broken up my execution windows into 12 weeks versus 6 months or a year. It helps me refine my focus and stay aligned to the mission because the mission is very clear and actionable. So my call to you is to go take what I have explained to you today, put it into action, and I want to know how it goes. So as you're having mid-year conversations, I want to hear. DM me on Instagram. Let me know where your challenges are. Let me know if you got feedback you didn't quite know what to do with. And if you're looking for support around this process or other processes like this, the best place for you to get that is inside of the Intentional Career Collective. Right now, we have a founding members offer. If you're listening to this some point in the future, it's likely expired, depending on how far in the future you're in. But the founding members offer is the lowest price that you're ever going to get. It locks you in at a lifetime price. And this will increase. It is going to go away. So if you want an opportunity to get in, to get coached, to learn these techniques, to be able to kick ideas around and help us problem solve for you, Intentional Career Collective is the place to be. There's a link in the show notes. So if you want to check it out and see what's offered, click that link. It will give you all the details. And until I see you again, friends, please remember you are wise, you are strong, and you are capable, and I believe in you.